When the AlphaTauri AT02 was first properly revealed, which wasn't at its launch, it was at a private shakedown in Imola, one of the most remarkable things about the car, and we only saw it in a few grainy photographs, was there was a significant change to the front end. As you heard, the nose of the AlphaTauri cost 2 tokens to the team, but the front of the monocoque was also different. Now, the regulations, as you heard, state that changing the front of the monocoque should cost you 2 tokens, but AlphaTauri have relocated the steering rack from this little cutout at the front here rearward to the position that Red Bull used last year. That's because this is the Red Bull front suspension layout from last season's car, and this is what JD Eggington calls a consequential change. But Craig, those rules do not appear, those words do not appear anywhere in the technical regulations, do they?
No. When we first saw this, I know we were discussing it, and it's like, well, how can you make such a big change? So some people may think that moving a steering rack from one place to another on a race car isn't a big deal, but this is a carbon fibre moulding. You can't just drill holes in the side of it and, you know, put a few nuts and bolts to move the rack into somewhere else. It's quite a big redesign, and yes, I would have thought that would require tokens. However, the regulations, and obviously AlphaTauri have been speaking to the FIA over the winter about the dispensations that are allowed to have in order to move to this new steering rack, which is supplied by their listed parts provider, Red Bull Racing, Red Bull Technology. And they said, well, you can make consequential changes. The consequential changes are fairly major. Now, this is, as we understand, a 2020 tub. They had some old tubs that they raced through the year, but also produced some new ones, as Jody was saying. But then there was modifications, and we can see some various glue and mould lines around the car, which kind of threw us when we first looked at this, in order to move that steering rack backwards. So it's one of those changes. It's not in the rules. It seems quite fair when you think about it, but I think AlphaTauri have gained quite a big advantage by having this effectively, you know, get out of jail free token to use on the car.
I mean, it's a big change as well, because this is a safety structure. This is a homologated part. Every team has to do a front-on crash test, push-off tests, and they've moved this steering rack. And I mean, that's got crash testing written all over it to me, which is a big change. And when you're re-crash testing something, you're re-homologating, it's a different project then. So when I first saw this car, I was like, well, they've moved the steering rack, it must be a different monocoque, it must be a new chassis. But this is actually the AT01, but with those different Red Bull components in, some of which you can see here, and it's exactly the same arrangement as last year's Red Bull. But something that a lot of people have asked is, have they gone for Red Bull's 2020 rear suspension? And they haven't. No. And I'm told that's because the gearbox casing, which would have had to come with it, they'd have to upgrade it to Red Bull's 2020 gearbox casing. Red Bull's gearbox last year was one of the big reasons for that rear end instability. So they've taken the front suspension, but they've got their own rear suspension from 2019 on the car.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you can see, the performance on track is really proving that they've taken the right direction on this, much as they were last year. And they gain a lot of performance from this in this area, because it moves the front axle forwards. And that has a couple of effects. First of all, it moves your tyres away from the front of your side pods, which obviously means you get less turbulence. Also gives you a bit more space for barge boards, which are clearly the most critical area, along with the floor edge in 2021 on aero. And it also means that with this repositioned steering arm, that they can actually get some different geometry on the front using some Ackerman setup. And again, I won't go into the technicalities, we'll be here forever. Yeah. But they've got some geometric changes that they can play about with the front here. So it's a very powerful tool that they've got here, effectively for free. And, well, I suppose good on them, because they're getting the performance out of it.
AlphaTauri have discovered probably the biggest loophole in the 2021 regulations that we've spotted so far, at least. And they've really optimised it. Is it going to work for them? It looks like it certainly is. I think a number of other teams up and down on the pit lane are kicking themselves that they didn't think of their own consequential changes.